the concepts we discussed yesterday about what can be used with the families. I think those that have already resolved their cases, you can allude to it, but you're not going to be able to go into details. In balancing out the one that's pending, I think it's well within their right to show bias, to mention the lawsuit, so they'll be permitted to go into the lawsuit into a point. Eventually, you know, if they're going to argue what a lawyer writes in a pleading is, and it's not a verified complaint, that's something we'll probably have to address at the time, but I think it's well within their right to impeach on the bias, and that's a foreshadowing of our discussions yesterday, and that was with Ms. Menashe. Anything else we need to discuss before we bring them in?
I can't find that one.
Yeah.
We're waiting on it.
Here. It's right here.
Oh, we have a couple jurors that aren't here yet.
Never mind, you got it.
I found it. Let's see if it'll attach this time, because I obviously have more attention. Thank you. I want to try it again, but yeah, if you could send it too, just maybe it's not sending from my iPhone. That's what I was saying about last night. There it is. It's right there.
Just like the whole, like it's already in the exhibit that's been admitted, just in case they need to look at it, but I'm not going to refer to it specifically. I'm sorry. Yeah, yeah.
You all ready then? Ready for the jury to come in? Let's bring them.
Well, I do it interchangeably, so I figured that I'm not real. It's very short.
Oh, no one's standing up.
Ms. Bucher's up first then?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Y'all can be seated. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. How are you today? Good morning. Okay, Ms. Bucher, why don't you call your next witness?
Thank you, Your Honor. The state calls Dr. Patel.
Okay, doctor, I need you to raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I,
Okay, once you get yourself situated there, you can lower your mask if you're comfortable in doing so. Okay, you have an aerial mic there in front of you. I need you to state your name for the record
Okay.
and then spell it for us, please.
Kanan Patel, K-A-N-A-N, last name Patel, P-A-T-E-L.
Because of the plexiglass, I want to make sure the jurors can hear you. Can you guys hear her okay? Or you want some volume? Give it a little bit more volume,
Okay.
okay?
Okay. My name's Kanan Patel. Do you want me to spell it again?
No.
Okay.
Can you all hear her now? Okay, thank you. Speaker?
I'm sorry, did the jurors need her to spell it again?
It's Kanan, K-A-N-A-N, last name Patel, P-A-T-E-L.
All right, thank you. Good morning, Dr. Patel.
Good morning.
Can you please tell me what it is that you do for a living?
I'm a hospitalist.
Okay, and where are you employed?
I'm employed with Columbus Inpatient Care.
And where do you perform your duties as a hospitalist?
Currently at Mount Carmel, Grove City.
Okay, and what type of education did you have in order to become a hospitalist?
I had my BHMS degree from India. I went to Seba University School of Medicine, finished 4 years of medical school. Then I did my residency in internal medicine at Mount Carmel West. After completing my residency, I started my job with Columbus Inpatient Care as a hospitalist.
Okay, and what are your general duties and responsibilities as a hospitalist currently?
I typically only work days and very few evening shifts. I don't work nights, so mostly it is rounding on the patients that are admitted in the hospital. And the days when I'm working evenings or stuff like that, I would be also admitting the patients from the ER and sometimes also seeing patients in consultations for orthopedic doctors if they request medical consultation.
And are your responsibilities now the same as they were back in 2018?
In 2018, I believe that we were also covering some nursing facilities, which we are not now anymore. So, but other than that, everything was same.
And were you working at Mount Carmel Grove City at the time?
It would be Mount Carmel West then.
Okay. So in 2018, you were working at Mount Carmel West as a hospitalist?
That is correct.
And as part of your duties, do you compose discharge summaries?
Yes.
Can you walk me through the process of how you compose these discharge summaries?
Yes. So if I'm assigned a discharge summary, then I will, it depends on where is the patient being discharged to. And if discharge summaries are different for patients who have passed away compared to patients who are alive and being discharged. So if someone who has passed away, then I would be looking at my note from a previous day or any of my colleagues who had seen the previous days or the consultant notes, would be looking at the labs or imaging any procedures they had done, and I would try to include all of those.
And for a patient who is no longer living, what in their record do you look for?
I would definitely look for what happened, or what, like my progress note the day before, or the consultant's notes for the day before, or any procedures in particular that I would include. It depends on the extent of how well I knew the patient.
Sure. And in the case where a patient is palliatively extubated, do you look at the medications that are administered for that?
No, not in a patient who's deceased.
Do you look at any of the medication orders?
No, unless I have a question or a reason to.
And moving on to death certificates, is that something that you have to, do you do anything with death certificates in your position?
If I'm assigned that death certificate to sign, then I will sign it.
When you say assigned, what does that mean?
In my group, basically, the last physician who saw the patient is the one that is assigned the death certificate.
Okay. And what types of things do you look at to determine what to write on the death certificate?
So death certificates are usually sent to us like few days after the patient has passed away, and a lot of the time they want those death certificates back within 24 hours or sooner. So I would look at the cause of the death, the immediate cause of the death that I felt, and any underlying conditions that would have led to the immediate cause of death.
All right. Now I want to draw your attention back to 2018. Do you recall treating a patient by the name of James Allen?
Only when I was summoned and looking at the records.
Okay. And as part of your preparation today, did you look at those records?
Yes, I did.
All right. And Your Honor, I'm going to go ahead and put up here an exhibit that we've already presented marked as 8D.
It's joint 8D?
We've been calling ours States exhibit, but it's the same thing. So sure, yes, we can just call it 8.
Well, I'm
Well,
asking if it's a state exhibit or a joint exhibit.
technically it's States exhibit 8D.
Okay, fair enough.
Let's see here. And can you tell me what this is here?
Discharge summary?
Okay, and did you write this discharge summary?
Yes, I did.
And who is it for?
Mr. Allen.
And is this something that you wrote for your discharge summary?
Yes.
And how did you come to the conclusions that you made in here?
By reviewing the hospital course, and that's like a brief summary of his hospital course.
Okay. And when you prepared this summary, did you look at the medication administration records?
No.
Did you look at the medication orders?
In preparing the discharge summary?
Yes.
No.
All right. I'm going to draw your attention. This is States Exhibit 18H. And do you recognize this document?
Yes.
And what is this?
It's a death certificate for Mr. Allen.
And is this your signature here?
Yes.
And can you explain to me the listed causes of death and why you put those on there?
Sure. So the immediate cause of death is listed as septic shock. That means he had infection in his blood. His blood was kind of poisoned with infection. And it was secondary to the bacteria called Pseudomonas that was in his blood. And we thought the reason why he had this bacteria because he had cholangitis, that is the inflammation or the infection of his biliary tree.
And when you wrote this,
Yes.
what was this based off of?
His hospital course.
And were you there when Mr. Allen died?
No,
And you did not look at any of his medications that had been administered when you wrote this?
no.
Okay, nothing further.
Ross?
Good morning, Dr. Patel.
Good morning.
It's nice to see you again. I'm going to put back up State's Exhibit 8D, Dr. Patel. Now, prior to being approached by the state and asked about Mr. Allen's case, you had no independent recollection as to anything that happened with him, correct?
No,
And that's because you see lots of patients, right?
yes,
But after having reviewed his records, are you prepared to testify about everything, including your role in Mr. Allen's care during his last day?
I can testify about my role, yes.
Okay. Well, let's just briefly talk about some of the things that happened with Mr. Allen. Now, you were seeing Mr. Allen when he came to the hospital, right?
I only saw him for one day.
And that was after you were notified by a nurse regarding his decompensating situation, correct?
Yeah, I believe that I was assigned that patient just that morning.
And you were urgently told to come see him.
Well, he's got,
Okay.
he wasn't asking questions about it, and it had been up there a long time.
Okay. Doctor, this morning of the 28th, that's when you were told to come see him, correct?
That is right.
Now, I just want to go through some things that happened before you saw him and then what happened after you saw him, okay? And these things are reflected on your hospital course, correct?
What I have written, that's what I've written, yes.
Okay. So initially, he came to the ICU initially on vasopressors for septic shock, correct?
Yes,
And vasopressors are a form of life support, correct?
yes,
So his body's already failing and he's already on the first form of life support the first time he comes to the ICU, correct?
that is very true.
Then he's transferred out of the ICU on May 27th, correct?
Yes,
But at that point, he starts to have complications and is given another round of life support, correct?
yes,
Okay. And then on the morning of the 28th is where you become involved, correct?
yes,
And that's when you're called because he became hypotensive and needed your immediate attention, correct?
yes,
And in that course of when you were seeing him, he was actually having, I believe it was bloody secretions removed from his body?
So I can, just from reviewing the records, I can say that his blood pressure was low. I had seen him at bedside. He was having difficulty breathing and couldn't bring up the secretions. And so we had to suction him because it was all in his throat, seems like, and he couldn't bring it up, and those were all bloody. Yes,
Okay. And throughout this time, you were actually speaking to Mr. Allen's family, correct?
I tried to stabilize him, and then I called the son, but yes, I did.
To update him regarding his worsening situation, right?
Yes,
Now, after you suctioned the bloody secretions from his throat, he then had a heart attack, correct?
he coded when in the ICU after that, yes.
And at that point, he was then again given a third round of life support, correct?
What do you mean by third round?
Vasopressors, level fed. In fact, you ordered the level fed,
Yes,
correct?
it was started before he coded.
Yes, and then it was increased
Yes,
every 15 minutes after he coded, correct?
yes, it was increased, yes.
Meaning his condition was worsening and you were increasing the amount of life support he needed every 15 minutes because his situation required it, correct?
Let me correct you there. He was on vasopressors. I started it on the floor, moved him to the ICU, his heart did stop, and then he was resuscitated and he was added more on vasopressors, but at that time ICU team had taken over. But
Okay.
it was increased, yes.
In fact, it was increased every 15 minutes until the course in which his family decided to withdraw life support, correct?
I will have to look at the records. It was increased, I can say for that. I cannot say for sure how often, but he was on a lot of vasopressors.
And you actually discussed the code status with Mr. Allen's son, daughter, and grandson, did you not?
I believe I asked for their wishes, what patient would have wished, or I would have briefly, I cannot remember the whole thing, but looking at my note, I definitely discussed something around there, and I would have definitely asked for what patient's wishes would be in that case, and yes, I did discuss that.
And eventually, per your note, based off his multiple comorbidities, the family decided to withdraw care, correct?
That information, I think I got it from the notes. When I left for the day, that was not decided. It was something that I found from the notes, or it was communicated to me by someone afterwards.
Correct.
When he passed away, but yes.
And you put it in your discharge summary because you felt it relevant enough to put it there, correct?
Yes.
Now, I'm going to refer to states 18H. Septic shock, I'm not going to try and pronounce that second one under B.
It's Pseudomonas septicemia,
And then the last one was?
cholangitis.
And then you also have here other significant considerations of hypertension and atrial fibrillation, correct?
Yes.
Now, you put these as his cause of death, correct?
The top three would be the cause of death. The other ones are comorbidities. He had more than this, but you cannot write all of them because if it's not legible, the death certificates get denied.
Correct, because they're important documents that need to be filled out correctly, otherwise they can be pushed back to you to fill out again, right?
Yes, and there is not space to put everything.
So, just to clarify, he had so many comorbidities, you couldn't fit him on the death certificate.
Not on the bottom part where it says hypertension and AFib. Over there would be more things I can add, but it's a long list.
So the list was so long with so many things that contributed to his death, you couldn't fit it on the death certificate.
The things that contributed to his death are the septic shock, Pseudomonas septicemia, and cholangitis. These are his other medical conditions he had over the course of his lifetime.
Okay. You can die from septic shock, correct?
Yes,
You can die from, I'm sorry, doctor, I can't pronounce that.
Pseudomonas septicemia.
You can die from that as well, correct?
It is an infection that led to septic shock, yes.
And you can die from cholangitis, correct?
If not treated, yes.
And in fact, if all three of them are there, you certainly can die from those three combined as well, correct?
Yes.
Nothing further.
Redirect? Okay, you may step down, doctor, thank you. Call your next witness.
Thank you. The state calls Dr. Abrahamyan.
Okay, come on up here, I need you to raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, why don't you go make yourself comfortable there? You've got that mic in front of you, it's an arrow mic.
Okay.
I need you to state your name and then spell it for me, please.
My name is Lucine Abrahamyan, Lusine Abrahamyan.
You guys hearing her okay? You want a little volume?
Could she repeat her name, please?
Sure. First name is Lucine, Lusine. Last name is Abrahamyan, Abrahamyan.
Y'all good then? You here? You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, doctor.
Good morning.
Could you please tell me a little bit about your background and education and how you became a doctor?
Sure. I graduated from Yerevan State Medical University in Armenia. Moved to U.S., continued my education in Mount Carmel Health System, internal medicine program, 3 years of residency. After completing my residency, I joined Columbus Inpatient Care, and I still work there.
When did you join Columbus Inpatient Care?
In 2013.
And has your position remained the same since 2013?
Yes.
And what is it that you do there?
I'm a hospitalist. I work in a hospital only, so we admit patients, we take care of patients throughout the hospital stay, then subsequently discharge them.
And back in 2017, where were you performing those duties?
I believe in Mount Carmel West Hospital.
All right. And can you tell me, as a part of your position, currently and back in 2017, did you prepare discharge summaries?
Yes.
Can you walk me through the processes of how you compose your discharge summary?
Of course, depending on the situation on a patient, if they do well, they get discharged from the hospital, then of course it's kind of a letter to a primary care doctor, what happened in the hospital, what kind of procedures were performed, diagnosis, medications, and such. If we do not have a good outcome, as we're kind of discussing here, then that discharge summary will just include brief summary of the hospitalization, again, procedures, and reason for the not as well outcome.
So when you say not as well outcome, do you mean the patient is deceased?
When they die, yes.
All right. And what types of things do you refer to when you compose this summary?
Usually it includes the dates of admission, date of discharge, brief summary of the hospitalization, diagnoses, and of course the condition that the patient was discharged, in this case, death.
And how do you decide on what those diagnoses are?
Throughout the hospital stay, when they come in, they come with some complaints, and we start investigating, trying to find the diagnosis, conditions, and try to treat them. Those are the diagnoses we carry on throughout the hospitalization. Sometimes they change depending on the results. They might have new problems happening in the hospital, and those are the diagnoses, basically.
Do you review the entire medical record for that stay when you compose the discharge summary?
No.
All right. Do you look at the medication administration records?
No.
Do you look at the medication orders?
Depends, as I said. If the patient is doing well, going home, we have new medications, of course, we'll review them because they need to go home with new medications. We prepare prescriptions for them. Yes, in that case, of course.
And in the case where the patient is deceased, do you look at the medication orders?
No,
And why not?
it won't give me anything, to be honest.
Okay. Now, I want to talk to you about death certificates. Do you complete death certificates as part of your position? Can you talk about that process,
Of
how you
course.
fill them out? How do you come to the conclusions that you come to?
Sure, when patient dies in a hospital, then usually in 2-3 days, sometimes even later, we receive the death certificate that we have to sign, and we look into progress notes or discharge summaries, and we have to, first line should be the immediate cause of death. and then any other chronic problems that brought to that condition that led to death, or some chronic conditions that could have complicated the patient's care and condition. And usually we include date of death and date we sign the death certificate.
All right, I want to talk to you about a patient named Beverly Schertzinger. Do you recall that patient?
To be honest, I did not until I received the records.
And you reviewed those records?
Yes, I did.
Prior to today?
I did.
Okay. And this is just pages 5 through 8 of State's Exhibit 3. Can you tell me what this is here?
This is a discharge summary.
And what patient is
When
this?
you looked away, you gotta speak up because it's the human nature when you're concentrated lower, so just give us a little.
So this
more.
is a discharge summary on Beverly Schertzinger.
And did you compose this?
Yes, I did. My name is there, so I did.
And is this the summary that you wrote, the overall summary?
Yes, yes.
And how did you come to these conclusions that you've put in here?
So if you see on the top active final diagnosis, it says cardiac arrest, and then one more serious condition included there, and includes hospital course. And I believe if you go down, you will see more discharge diagnosis, including in a summary after the hospital course. Again, the hospital course is a brief summarization of happening in a hospital. What we did, why the patient came in, what type of diagnostic studies were performed, what kind of other subspecialties were involved, and such.
And how do you know that all of those things happened?
We do follow the patients on a daily basis, and we write progress notes. That means we try to summarize that day. Again, what were the suspected diagnoses, what is the plan of care, medications given, or procedures to be done. Day by day, medical doctor, hospitalist will follow the patient, either me or one of my partners. Then when we have to perform discharge summary, we kind of review all of those notes and try to summarize, basically.
And when preparing the discharge summary for Ms. Schertzinger, were you referring to other doctors' progress notes?
Yes,
And were you referring to nurses' progress notes?
I do not think I was referring progress notes. The progress note prior there was my progress note.
And when preparing this, did you look at Ms. Schertzinger's medications that she was given?
I did not.
And I'm going to show you what's marked as State's Exhibit 18C. Can you tell me what this is?
This is a death certificate
And who is it for?
for Beverly Schertzinger.
And did you sign this death certificate?
Yes, I did.
Is that your signature right
That's
here?
my signature up there.
Okay, and can you explain to me what these diagnoses are or causes
Sure.
of death are?
I can go over just briefly summary to summarize that I think we had not unexpected, but cardiopulmonary arrest in a hospital. And immediate cause of death was basically cardiopulmonary arrest, but discharge, death certificates have rules. You cannot write cardiopulmonary arrest. You have to at least write the diagnosis that you suspect that led to cardiopulmonary arrest.
And when you say cardiopulmonary arrest, what is that in layman's terms?
Basically, patient's heart stops and they stop breathing.
So you're saying the heart stopped and there was you need to give a reason why the heart stopped?
Yes, yes,
And so when you put suspected pulmonary embolism,
correct.
how did you come to that conclusion?
Again, reviewing the chart, prior studies, diagnosis that kind of what we were working on and suspecting, and in this case was stage 4 lung cancer, which was newly diagnosed.
And
Blood
how-
work and just, based on our clinical experience and education, you come up with the medical diagnosis that could have caused most likely.
And how did you come to the diagnosis of the small cell lung cancer?
Pathology results. I believe Ms. Scherzinger had liver biopsy in the hospital. It was the spot that we were suspecting came from her lung cancer to her liver, and she had a biopsy of it. And those results were resolved a little bit later. Usually it takes 3-4 days to finalize. And I had those results in handy, so I could write it on the death certificate.
So you had the results by the time you wrote the death certificate.
Correct.
So in your progress notes where it says most likely,
Correct.
does that mean at the time you did not have the results?
I did not have the results again. When they do a biopsy, it takes 3-4 days usually to have the results. And by the time I did the discharge summary, I did not have those results.
And did you go back over the medical records and your discharge summary when you filled out the death certificate for Ms. Scherzinger?
Yes.
Did you look at the medication administration records?
No. Again, I was looking for pathology result, just finalized, since lung cancer was suspected, but we did not have any final results. And usually it's helpful when you have some final results and you can put it on a death certificate.
Okay. Now, I'd like to draw your attention to a woman named Joanne Belisari. Do you recognize that name?
I do, just because I reviewed the records.
Okay, so you reviewed those records prior to today.
Correct.
And I'm showing what's marked as States Exhibit 1, page 6 through 9. Can you tell me what this is here, please?
This is a discharge summary on Ms. Belisari, Joanne.
And did you create this discharge summary?
I did.
And is this the narrative that you wrote?
Yes.
And how did you come to these conclusions in your discharge summary?
Again, reviewing all the progress notes, all the studies, and summarizing and briefly, trying to be brief here, but as you can see, this was a very prolonged hospital stay, and sometimes it's not possible to put everything in a discharge summary, but I guess I tried. Even with dates to have pertinent changes, points to put out there.
When you prepared this discharge summary, did you look at Ms. Belisari's medication administration record?
No, I did not.
Did you look at the medication orders?
No.
And I'm going to show you States Exhibit 18A. Can you tell me what this is?
This is a death certificate
And
for
who's-
Joanne Belisari.
Okay, and did you create this death certificate?
I did.
And can you tell me how you came to these conclusions as to the diagnosis or the causes of death?
Again, most likely immediate cause of death. Her condition got worse, and what led to her death, it was a healthcare-associated pneumonia, which took days, if you see on the side. And of course, she had very large lung lesion, which kind of a predisposing factor to have pneumonia to become very complicated. And she had kidney problems as well, so that was not helping.
So when you prepared this death certificate, did you go back and look at Ms. Belisari's medication administration record?
Not to medications, no,
So none of the medications that were ordered either?
no.
Nothing further?
Ross?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Diane Menashe on behalf of Dr. Husel. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Oh, let's start where you ended off, if we could. I'll go to State's Exhibit 18A. It appears to be the death certificate for Joanne Belisari, is that correct?
Correct?
And just so we're clear, is this actually your handwriting here?
Yes, it is my handwriting.
Want to talk about the word lesion. Fair to say, another word that might be more non-medical for lesion would be a mass?
Mass?
A mass. And you wrote large right lung cavitary lesion, or mass. And you noted that as the primary cause of death, is that correct?
Yes.
And then we've got this healthcare-associated pneumonia, and you noted that as having occurred for days. Do you see that?
Correct?
And so by this secondary cause, she actually picked up pneumonia, she being Miss Belisari, while she was at Mount Carmel West. Is that correct? And I know on your direct examination, you had testified that she had had a prolonged stay at the hospital preceding her death in this case.
Correct.
And then the final cause is listed here was renal failure, and her kidneys had shut down. Is that fair to say?
That's not a final cause. That's one of her problems.
Sure. I'm sorry. It's a secondary. Is that how you testified to it on direct?
One of problems. She had many problems, so this is one of her. I could have written 10 or 12 problems here, to be honest, on a discharge, on a death certificate.
And I think that was where I was going to go with Miss Belisari. Fair to say that she had a significant amount of serious health conditions.
Correct.
And Miss Belisari was a 69-year-old woman.
Correct.
And if we look at the discharge summary showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 1, page 6 through 9, as indicative of the number of issues that she was suffering from, you would agree with me that the number of consulting physicians that had a touch point with Miss Belisari was significant.
Correct.
And the reason why she came in on 4/22 initially was because she was having seizures.
Correct.
And then she had more than one seizure. She continued to have seizures. Is that correct?
Correct.
And seizures, would you agree with me, one, if not more than that, can alone cause serious issues with your mind, right, and your body in general?
If they're continuously.
And I want to go down here with respect to the active diagnoses. And again, this is your discharge summary, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And it altered mental status, do you see that?
I do see that.
The lung mass, which was the lesion that we talked about.
Correct.
We've got, talk about this right here, the press.
The press is a condition when someone has uncontrolled high blood pressure. That means you have high blood pressure, but it's not controlled with medications, or you're not taking medications, and you're usually in very high numbers, and you can have seizures, you can have change in your mental state. And that's basically a condition. It's a swelling of your brain.
And then we have prostration is the next word there. Please explain that to the jury.
To be honest, that's not a diagnosis. It's just a presentation symptom, like fever.
And then we have the
it
note
just-
of the seizure and then the multiple seizures written in the plural. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then I know you talked about on the following page the hospital course. Given it was a long stay, as you indicated, you did your best to summarize the care that she received.
Correct.
And we note up here the admit date was 4/22 with the discharge date of 5/10. So she was in there for over 2 weeks.
Correct.
And fair to say in your hospital course, you talk about the procedures that were initiated to determine the issues that Ms. Belisari was experiencing and whether those issues could be treated by the hospital or not.
Correct.
And then down here, you note, do you not, that the family decided to withdraw her care since her condition was getting worse, and shortly after withdrawal, she passed. Do you see that note?
I do see that.
And that's, of course, at the end of the 2+ week stay that we've just discussed,
Correct.
correct? And I want to talk about now the other patient that was discussed, Ms. Schertzinger.
Sure.
Showing you what's been listed as States Exhibit 18C. Cause of death on this line right here, you write suspected pulmonary embolism. Do you see that?
I do see that.
And, you know, I think if we can, I just want to focus in here. In this box right here, and I know it's hard to see, but I'm sure you're familiar with it given your work as a hospitalist. It says, does it not, immediate cause? Is that what those words are?
It is immediate, yes.
Yes. And then this box right here indicates sequentially list conditions, if any, leading to immediate cause. Do you see that language?
I see that.
It's possible, is it not, to not list any sequential conditions? I mean, sometimes you just have the immediate cause. Would you agree with me on that?
Well, if you have immediate cause, you should have some problems that, you just don't have one cause.
And that is why there's multiple lines, correct, on this form?
Correct. Yes.
Because having secondary causes to the immediate cause is common.
Can you repeat that
Sure.
question again, please?
You just indicated that you would have the immediate cause, and then with an immediate cause, you would have these secondary things that contributed to the immediate.
Correct.
And I know when we were just discussing, showing you what's been marked as States Exhibit 18A, Ms. Belisari, you indicated that there was a significant number of secondary causes, too many even to list.
Sure.
So going back to Ms. Schertzinger, States Exhibit 18C, I just wanted to be clear about something that you indicated in your direct, that at the time of you writing and filling out her death certificate, you did in fact have the results of the biopsy.
Correct.
And did you have the results of the biopsy when you filled out the discharge summary?
No, I did
Okay.
not.
So that was supplemental information that you received between drafting of the discharge and filling out the death certificate?
Correct.
And the results of the biopsy, please tell the jury what they were.
Small cell lung cancer, that's type of a lung cancer, one of the most aggressive ones.
And so actually her liver cancer had metastasized and gone into her, I'm sorry.
Her lung cancer.
Her lung cancer had metastasized and gone into her liver.
Correct.
And that's what the biopsy showed.
Yes.
And thus, you writing here the note about the lung cancer.
Yes, the word metastatic means the cancer has gone to other organs.
And you indicated months there?
Yes.
Okay. And you indicated that just as a result of your review of the biopsy?
Just based on my knowledge, that lung cancer doesn't happen in days, even though this was diagnosed newly, but most likely the condition was there for a month.
It was a pre-existing condition.
Exactly.
I want to just go back, if we can, through some of the records with respect to Ms. Schertzinger. Showing you what's been marked as States Exhibit 3, page 5 through 8. Hasn't been discussed, but she did have a history of tobacco abuse. Is that true?
Correct. If it's there, then yes.
And she also had diabetes.
That's what it says.
Yes. And I wanted to go down here, just respect to the medications that she was receiving before. These are medications she was receiving before she arrived on 4/22, is that correct?
To be honest, I can't tell you for sure, since the medication list would auto-generate in a discharge summary. It's an electronic record. It might be some of her home medications, some of the medications that we started in the hospital.
Okay, and so I want to focus here, and you don't know, this could be medication
I
she
don't
was
know.
on, or medication she was receiving at the hospital.
Correct.
Tramadol. Would you agree with me that the notation there is 50 milligrams by mouth every 6 hours as needed for pain? Do you see
Correct.
that? And that's listed as her medication. Correct?
Correct.
And then I want to go up here, the note, fair to say that after, in the discharge summary, you note that after she had the biopsy, she developed this abdominal pain.
Yes.
And you recall, I assume, from your review of the records, that she actually verbally expressed, because she wasn't yet intubated, how much pain she was experiencing as a result of the biopsy.
Correct.
And then at some point, her blood pressure dropped and a code was called. Is that correct?
Correct.
Tramadol. It's an opioid, is it not?
It's one of the least, I would say, it's one of the naive ones.
It's one
It
of the
is,
naive
yes,
ones.
narcotic medication, yes.
I want to make sure, with respect to your testimony, that you reviewed the progress notes for Miss Schertzinger. Do you remember that?
I reviewed my progress note. There was only one progress note written
Okay.
by me.
I want to talk to you about that note then. Showing you, does this look as if this is your note?
Can I see the signature, and then it should be a name?
Yes. Can you get me, sorry. Can you get me the company page? One moment while I get
Sure.
that.
Right on the top, it should be a name of the physician who wrote the progress note. Yes,
Okay. Showing you, then, when you say yes, sorry.
oh, sorry.
This is,
No, this is not mine.
this is not yours?
No.
Okay, the one I have waiting for is, just give me a second, please. It's not mine, okay. Can I have that back? Then let me just ask you this, because you reviewed your progress note, how recently did you review it?
Maybe a week ago?
Okay. Fair to say that in your progress note, there was a dispo section, was there not? And you talked about how the plan of care was discussed with the family at the bedside. Do you remember that in your progress note?
I do.
You do?
Mhm.
And you also discussed in the progress note about the abdominal pain that the patient was experiencing as a result of the
Yes.
biopsy? And you also indicated, did you not, that the symptoms had gotten worse
Yes,
after the biopsy?
yes.
Does this look like your progress note?
Okay, what is that?
I'm sorry.
You have to scroll it all the way down. So I can see my signature all the way.
There are multiple pages. It goes on here.
Yes,
It does.
this is my progress.
And the questions that I just asked you with respect to what is
Hold on.
included.
What's the exhibit number on that since you showed it to her?
Thank you. Joint Exhibit 3, page 123 to 124. Do you see where it says electronically signed by?
Yes,
Okay, and I just want to confirm that that's
That's
your
my
name, and this
name,
is Joint
correct.
Exhibit 3, page 123 to 124. Correct?
correct.
And also, I know we did the biopsy, we talked about the biopsy, but there was also a CT scan, was there not?
That's the CT scan for an admission, it mentions here. CT scan, when she was admitted, revealed she has lung mass.
Right, and so I just wanted to go back to that, which is the CT scan predated the biopsy, is that correct?
Correct,
And then there was also an MRI done?
correct,
So these are some of the measures that were performed on Ms. Schertzinger before her ultimate passing, some 2+ weeks later.
correct.
And then I just wanted to make this note right here on 10/9 when the biopsy was done. You have this note in your progress notes that the family mentioned dysphagia.
Correct,
And dysphagia is difficulty swallowing, is it not?
yes,
And then just to confirm, because now we have your progress notes, when I asked you about, did you include that there was a discussion of the plan of care with family at bedside, do you see that in your dispo?
I do,
And then just again, with respect to the comments, that the patient describes abdominal pain, do you see that?
I do see that.
Nothing further.
Redirect?
Just quickly, Your Honor.
Did you read this?
I'm referring back to State's Exhibit 3, page 5 through 8. When asked on cross about the medications, you said that was auto-generated?
Usually, yes,
So do you know whether or not this patient was taking any of these medications when they were admitted,
in a hospital or prior to hospital?
prior to the hospital stay?
Some of them are ordered as needed. That means when the patient asks for it, then they will have it. But I can't tell you from this notes whether they received it or not.
Okay. And for both of these patients, for Ms. Belisari and Ms. Schertzinger, when you wrote your discharge summary and death certificates, did you look at the doses of medications that were given during their palliative extubations?
No, I did not.
Asked and answered, rejected.
I'll permit it.
Go ahead.
No, I did not.
Thank you. Nothing further, Your Honor.
Okay, ma'am, you may step down. Thank you kindly. Call your next witness.
The state calls Geraldine Brown.
It's me.
Geraldine Brown.
Okay, Ms. Brown, I'm gonna have you raise your right hand. You solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. You want to make yourself comfortable. You got an aerial mic there in front of you,
Okay,
so it'll pick you up, you gotta enunciate a little bit, talk out loud.
okay.
Shout it if you have to, okay?
Okay,
Go ahead and state your name for the record and spell it for my court reporter.
okay. Geraldine Brown, Geraldine.
You guys hearing her? Okay.
Did you want me to
No,
spell it?
no, it's spell Brown.
Okay. Brown.
Okay. You can sit comfortably, you just, as long as you enunciate across it, it'll pick you
Oh.
up. Okay, so just say your name again for me, you don't have to spell it.
Geraldine Brown.
You guys got it? Okay. Thank you. Go ahead.
Ms. Brown, where do you currently live?
I live in London, Ohio.
And are you employed?
No, I'm disabled.
What type of work did you do prior to being disabled?
I did factory work.
And did you know Miss Brandy McDonald?
Yes.
Do you want me to walk up to her and publish? It's her, I just marked her identified. Do you want me to walk up to her and I just publish? You can publish. All right. Permission to publish.
May.
Is this Miss McDonald?
Yes.
And this says States Exhibit 5A for the record. Miss Brown, how did you know Brandy?
I live with her mother.
And what is your relationship with Brandy's mother?
She's my partner.
How long have you been with Brandy's mother?
8 years.
And can you tell me how long did you know Brandy?
8 years.
What was your relationship like with Brandy?
I loved Brandy with all my heart. She was like my own.
Were you close with her?
Yes. We talked a lot on the phone and text each other.
Can you tell the jury about the rest of Brandy's family? Does she have a mom and a dad still living?
Yes.
Does she have any siblings?
She had a brother, but he died at age 13.
Does she have any children?
Yes, she had one child,
And is that a son or a daughter?
a daughter.
And how old is Brandy's daughter now?
She just turned 17.
Are you familiar with Brandy's battle with cancer?
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that, please?
She fought for the past 8 years, I think, ovarian cancer.
Were you involved with taking her to treatment and things of that nature?
Yes.
And did her cancer go into remission at some point?
Yes, it did for a while, and then it came back.
I want to take you back to January 11th of 2018. Did you take Brandy to the hospital that day?
Yes, I did.
Why did you have to take her to the hospital?
Her primary care doctor had done blood work on her that morning, and she called us, or called Brandy. She was at our house, and called Brandy and told her that she needed to get to the ER because her liver enzymes were up.
Was it just you and Brandy that rode to the hospital, or did anyone else join you?
No, her mom.
And how was Brandy when you arrived, or which hospital did you take her to?
Mount Carmel,
Was that Mount Carmel West?
West.
And how was she when you arrived at the hospital that day?
She seemed not too bad. I mean, she was bloated and had fluid on, a little fluid on her. And she seemed fine to us. She was laughing and talking.
And how did she actually get into the hospital? From
We
the car?
Yeah, we drove her.
How did she get from the car to the hospital?
Oh, she walked in on her own.
And how long?
From the garage.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
You can repeat what you said.
From the garage, parking garage.
Okay,
And
let's help my court report a little bit, okay? We do by question and answer. This young lady out here is taking down what's going on. When you both talk at the same time, she has a problem. So let's try to let her finish her question. We got all day to hear your answers, okay? Just relax, okay?
Thank you.
Counsel?
Thank you. How was Brandy when you left the hospital on the 11th?
She seemed okay to me.
Did you go back to the hospital the next day, the 12th?
No. We thought that we'd let John and his family and her dad and them come up and visit.
Just to clarify, who is John?
John is Brandy's boyfriend.
Okay. Is that the father of her child as well?
Yes.
Did you speak to Brandy on the 12th at any point?
On the phone.
And how was she when you talked to her that day?
She was doing okay.
Did you go to the hospital the next day, the 13th?
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that? How was Brandy?
She was now that day she was feeling a little nauseous and a little short of breath.
Did you just stay in her room with her that day?
No, we took her, she wanted to go downstairs and go to Tim Hortons to get an iced coffee, and she wanted to go to the gift shop to get a book to work.
At some point that day, did you become aware of a blood clot in Brandy's lung?
Yes.
Okay, we got an objection? Did I hear one?
Yeah.
I mean, I'll withdraw it.
Okay.
Can you tell us about that, please?
When she was short of breath, we let them know, and they came back and they took her and I'm not sure what type scan. It was either a CAT scan or something, and they said that she had a blood clot in her lung.
Did Brandy come back to the room after that?
Yes.
And did you stay the night or did you go home that night?
We went home. We asked if she wanted us to stay, and it was snowing pretty good that day, and she said she would rather us go on home.
And what happened next after you got home?
It was probably in between midnight and 1 o'clock in the morning, and the hospital called and said that Brandy went into respiratory distress and they have to put her on a ventilator.
What did you do at that point?
Well, we flew back to the hospital, and then we called Jim and John, and they came up.
When you say we, do you mean you and Brandy's mom?
Yes.
Did you get to see Brandy when you got back to the hospital at that point?
Excuse me?
Sorry, when you got back to the hospital, did you get to see Brandy at that point?
No.
Why was that?
They wouldn't let anybody back there. They said they were working on her.
At some point during the day, were you present for any conversations about a code status?
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
They wanted to know about a DNR.
Was there a conversation about a DNR CCA versus a
Yeah.
DNR CC?
Yes.
And what was the decision that was made at that first meeting?
The family wanted to wait and think about it to figure out what they were going to do for sure.
Did you get to see Brandy at some point after that conversation?
Yes.
Can you tell us about that?
You mean when she was on the ventilator?
Whenever you got to see her next, if she was on a ventilator at that
Oh,
time or not?
Yes, she was on a ventilator.
Yeah. Right. Was she awake?
No.
Did she appear to be in any pain?
No.
Who all was present at this point?
Alita and I, and Alita's sister Dixie, Diane Ripley, our friend, and John and Brooke, and John's couple sisters, and then there was 2 friends that went to high school with Brandy. And then, Jim and Linda McDonald.
Just for the record, you named a few names there we haven't heard before. Who is Alita?
Alita's Brandy's mother.
Who is Brooke?
Brooke is Brandy's daughter.
And who are Jim and Linda?
Jim and Linda's Brandy's dad,
And Linda?
and Linda and his wife.
Thank you. At some point later that evening, was there another conversation that you were present for about code status?
Yes, when they decided to take her off the ventilator.
And who made that decision?
It was made by her, Brandy's dad and Brandy's mother.
But you were present for
Yes.
all of this. Was Dr. Husel there for this conversation?
I can't remember which doctor, there was a doctor there, but I can't remember what doctor it was.
Who else was present for this conversation?
John, John was there, and Brandy's dad and his wife, and me and Alita.
Was there any other medical staff present for the conversation?
There may have been a nurse.
Can you tell us the best of your memory about that conversation?
Just that we didn't, her mom and dad didn't believe that she wanted to live on a ventilator, and she told us in the past, during all of her chemo's treatments and things, that if that ever happened, that she didn't want to live on a ventilator.
And at the time that this conversation was taking place, had Brandy appeared to be in pain at any point?
No.
During that conversation, did the doctor inform you that Brandy would be given 1,000 micrograms of fentanyl?
No.
Did the doctor inform you that she would be given fentanyl at all?
No.
Did the doctor inform you?
Your Honor, I'm gonna have to object. I don't think there's even testimony that it was a doctor that was having the conversation.
She said there was a doctor there, she just didn't know which one. I believe it was a testimony. Go ahead.
Okay. Did the doctor inform you that Brandy would be given 6 milligrams of midazolam, also called Versed?
No.
Did the doctor inform you that she would be given any midazolam or Versed?
No.
Did the doctor inform you that Brandy would be given any medication at all?
No.
Did the doctor discuss any side effects that you might be associated with the palliative withdrawal?
Yeah.
Can you tell us about
Yes.
that?
I mean, yes.
Sorry, can you tell us about that, please?
They said that when you take the ventilator out, there might be some gurgling and a little gasping.
Okay, can you give me a little bit of volume there? You're fading down a little bit.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
They
I'm
said
not
that.
trying to be mean.
Okay. They said that when you take a ventilator out, that it can cause some gurgling and gasping for breath.
Did the doctor elaborate on that at all?
No,
Did the doctor inform you whether or not any medication could be given for that gurgling?
no.
Did you feel that this was a thorough conversation?
At the time, yeah, yes.
Did you feel that the family was rushed to make this decision?
No.
What happened next after the decision to change code status was made?
You mean after the ventilator was taken out?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Or, well, let me slow you down a little bit. After the decision to take Brandy off of the ventilator was made, did you and the family remain present in the room, or did you leave and go to a different room?
We stepped out in the hallway while they took the ventilator off.
Were
And
you
then-
present? Sorry, continue. I don't
And
know if
then-
I cut you off.
I'm sorry. And then we went right back in.
Were you present when the medication was administered?
No.
What happened next after you stepped out and went back in the room?
Then it didn't take very long and Brandy passed. It seemed like it only took 10, 15 minutes.
Who all was in the room at that point?
John, Brooke, oh no, wait a minute, Brooke was out with her grandmother in the lobby. And Alita, and I, Diane, Ripley, and Dixie, and the two friends of Brandy's.
What happened after that? After she passed?
Lita had to release her body to the coroner.
And just to clarify, did anyone from your family request that Brandy be given pain medication?
No,
Did anyone from your family ever tell the medical staff that Brandy appeared to be in pain?
no.
Now, I want to jump forward in time a little bit. How did the investigation concerning the defendant come to your attention? How did you first become aware of it?
Oh, we got a phone call, Alita got a phone call from Dr. Santa Emma, and he told us that,
Objection, Your Honor.
Okay, you can't say what someone else said, okay?
oh, I can't?
No,
Okay.
sorry. Okay?
Okay.
After that phone call, well, was that phone call concerning Brandy?
Yes,
After that phone call, did you have any further contact with Dr. Santa Emma?
yes.
And what was that?
We had a meeting with him at the palliative care office.
When you say we, who was present for that meeting?
It was Alita and I and Diane Ripley.
At some point, did the police contact your family? If you're aware.
Yes,
And do you know who they interviewed?
Alita and Diane Ripley.
Did Brandy's family consult with a lawyer at some point following this?
Objection, Your Honor, it's to knowledge. Calls for speculation.
Okay, rephrase.
Are you aware if Brandy's family consulted with a lawyer following this?
Yes.
And why was that?
Objection, call for
Sustained.
speculation.
To your knowledge, does Brandy's family currently have a lawsuit open against the defendant and the hospital?
Yes.
Are you a party to that lawsuit?
No.
And ma'am, could you just explain to the jury why you are the representative for Brandy's family in court here today?
Because
Objection, Your Honor, is
Sustained.
irrelevant. We'll just strike that.
Ladies and gentlemen, you strike the last question and answer.
Ms. Brown, does Brandy's mother, how does she react when she has to talk about Brandy's death?
she gets really upset.
Is it hard for her to talk about?
Objection, Your Honor, leave it.
Rephrase.
Is it easy or hard for her to talk about, or how does she handle talking about it?
Asked and answered.
Overruled.
You can go ahead.
Okay. She gets pretty worked up and kind of blows up a little.
And I just want to revisit one topic briefly. Can you describe how Brandy looked when she went to the hospital on the 11th?
Objection, Your Honor, asked and answered.
I'll permit it. You may answer.
She didn't look very bad at all. She was talking, laughing with us.
Could you also tell us how she looked prior to the extubation?
She looked unconscious, no response.
After you left the hospital on the 13th, did you have any further conversations with Brandy?
After when?
When you left the hospital on the 13th?
No.
No further questions.
Ms. Menashe?
Would you like me to go now or a break? Great, go now.
Go ahead.
Okay, great. No, I don't. One moment, Your Honor. Good morning.
Good morning.
Diane Menashe on behalf of Dr. Husel. I'm just going to go back over some of the things that you talked about and also ask you some additional questions. Let me begin with where you ended with respect to you being here in court today. Tell me how many times you've met in preparation for today with any of the attorneys seated over here.
How many times I met with them?
Yeah.
Once?
Okay, and you also, I know that you had the meeting at Mount Carmel Hospital that you referenced with Dr. Santa Emma.
Yes.
And did you ever meet with anyone from Columbus Police Department?
I didn't.
Just Alita and John did, and Diane.
Yes.
At any point in time during the meeting with the prosecutors or at any time, have you ever been shown or provided Brandy's medical records from her stay at Mount Carmel?
I wasn't, no.
And so you've never had an opportunity to review what happened from the medical side of when she was at Mount Carmel. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
And can we presume, I know during your testimony, you talked about that you dropped Brandy off on the 11th. Do you remember that testimony?
That's when we took her in, yes.
Yeah. Took her to Mount Carmel West on January 11th.
Yes,
And then on the 12th, you did not go see her at the hospital.
right,
And then the January 13th was the next day that you saw her.
yes,
And then at some point, later in the day of the 13th, you left the hospital, is that correct? You went home.
yes,
And then it was when you were at home later at night that you received the phone call that she was being intubated. Do you remember receiving that phone call?
yes,
And that phone call that came to the house was, if you know, from the hospital alerting you to the critical nature of the situation.
yes,
And you and Alita, did you not rush down to the hospital based on that telephone call?
yes,
And you and Alita, did you not start the phone tree of calling everyone in the family and friends to get everyone to the hospital so that they would be there for Brandy?
yes,
And as a testament to Brandy, it seems that everyone arrived at the hospital pretty quickly. Would you agree with me on that?
yes,
Her two friends from high school, John got there, correct?
yes,
Her dad, Brooke, and a significant number of people.
yes.
I want to go, I want to go back through now. We talked about Brandy's battle with cancer. It had been significant, and you mentioned that it had been 8 years that she had been battling ovarian cancer. Is that correct?
Yes,
And you learned, did you not, as a function of being at the hospital, that it was believed that the experimental medication she was taking to treat her cancer might have caused some negative effects.
yes,
So while it was intended to help her, it might well have actually hurt her.
yes,
You mentioned on January 12th that you didn't go to the hospital, that you let John and her dad go and some other family members. There was no, and because we've lived in a COVID era, I just asked you this, there was no limitation back then, though, about visitations at hospitals. Is that correct?
yes,
And as many people that could gather at a hospital back in 17?
yes,
And there was, as you recall it, when you initially dropped off Brandy, do you remember what floor she was on?
I think the 3rd floor, but I'm not positive.
Okay? Fair to say that the floor that Brandy was originally on was not the ICU.
Right,
And
yes,
that's, she walked in and she was checked in and she was on a non-ICU floor. Is that fair to say?
yes,
And however, when you went back on the 13th, after receiving the call, she was then on a different floor, was she not?
yes,
And that was the ICU floor, as you come to know it?
yes,
And so just in that 48 hours, just based on her change of floor, things had drastically changed for Brandy.
yes,
And you knew that there had been that blood clot found in her lung. You were provided that information by one of the doctors, is that correct?
yes,
And I presume that when you were given that information, that it was given to you that a blood clot in the lung could be a very serious condition.
yes,
You were asked a lot of questions about code status and who made what decisions. Just so the jury's clear, though, you were not, or are not, Brandy's durable power of attorney.
no,
You are not, or were not, the family member or next of kin that was making any kind of decisions with respect to Brandy's end-of-life care.
no, wait a minute, could you say it again?
Sure. You weren't responsible for the decision whether or not Brandy would stay on or off the ventilator and be palliative extubated, correct?
Right.
Who was the person responsible for that?
Both her parents.
And so that would be Alita and Jim?
Yes.
And they ultimately, they being Alita and Jim, made the decision to palliatively extubate her.
Yes.
And do both Alita and Jim live in Ohio?
Yes.
You were asked questions about Brandy's level of pain. Let's focus when she was on the floor that wasn't the ICU. Fair to say, Brandy, having gone through all the chemo and all the treatments that she did in those 8 years, that she wasn't one that often complained.
Right.
She was a pretty tough woman.
She's brave, yes.
Right. And I assume she was brave till the end.
I do too.
You were asked about conversations, or a conversation with a doctor. I'm presuming that on direct, the conversation you were asked about was one that took place in the ICU. So let me ask you about the conversation you testified to in the ICU. You do not know if the doctor was Dr. Husel, isn't that correct?
Yes.
And without asking you what you've watched, fair to say though, over the last 4.5 years that you've probably seen some coverage about this case on the news?
Yes.
You've probably seen photographs of tissue anywhere? I'm sorry. Is there tissue? Oh, I just want to make sure. Tissue.
Oh,
Thank you.
thank you.
Of course. May I approach?
Okay.
You've probably seen a number of photos of Dr. Husel on the news. Can I presume that?
Yes.
And were you one of the individuals that participated in that Channel 10 story that they did?
No.
Has anyone from either the prosecutor's office or Mount Carmel ever shown you pictures of other doctors and asked you, was this who you had the conversation with?
No.
Have they ever shown you, they being the prosecutors or Mount Carmel, shown you pictures of nurses and asked, was a nurse the one that had the conversation with you?
No.
But what you do remember about the conversation with the family was that there was an initial conversation about her status. Would you agree with me on that?
Yes.
And the family at the time, and I'm assuming Alita and her dad, her mom and dad, indicated that they needed more time to think about it. Isn't that true?
Yes.
And they were given more time. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
You know, based on your relationship and closeness with Brandy, that she did not want to live on a ventilator.
No.
Can I presume that, given Brandy's cancer, that those types of discussions were had between Brandy and her family?
Yes.
And do you know what stage of cancer that she had?
I know it spread, but
It had spread to other parts of her body other than just where it began. Is that fair
Right.
to say?
yes.
And Brandy knew, did she not, that it could cause her death?
Yes.
And so the first conversation was had, and the family said, the family that had the power to make the decision, said that they needed more time. And then there was a time, was there not, that the family had thought about it and discussed it, and then decided at that point to palliatively extubate, to have Brandy palliatively extubated?
Yes,
This discussion, this second discussion on the ICU floor, on direct, you were asked about it. The family, in your opinion and observations, did not feel rushed, is that correct?
right.
And you also felt at the time that the information that you were given was thorough.
Yes,
Just a few more questions if we could. You were asked on direct about what you observed about Brandy in terms of before she was intubated and then after, whether she was experiencing pain. Do you remember those questions?
yes,
And you remember that well, let me just say, fair to say that at that moment in time, when Brandy was being extubated, there was an incredible amount of stress that was going on. For you personally.
oh, yes,
And the family and friends were all gathered there in the room, were they not?
yes,
And do you remember being asked previously if you remember if she was breathing hard, and you indicated that you weren't?
Well, she talked about it, I'll permit it.
And you indicated that it was so stressful that you weren't paying attention per se to her breathing.
yes,
I presume that you were just trying to absorb her last moments of life as a family. Is
yeah,
that true?
yes,
And in those moments after she was extubated, wasn't John holding one hand?
I think,
And was her mother able to hold her other hand?
yes,
And you talked about that list of people that was in the room with Brandy, and I want to make sure that I didn't leave anyone out, but Alita's sisters were there, Diane, John, Brooke, 2 friends from high school. Clearly, Brandy was very loved.
yes, she was,
And even despite the stress and the situation, it seemed as if everyone had the time and made the time to gather for Brandy that night, didn't they?
yes, they did.
Nothing further. Thank you, Judge.
Redirect? Do you have a long one, because we're at break time?
Your Honor, if we could break, so we could confer briefly.
Okay, let's take our 15 minutes, ladies and gentlemen. We'll get started at 10:02. Have a wonderful break. Remember the admonition. Madam Bailiff, go ahead.
All right.
Enjoy the break. Just relax. I'll get to you here in 1 second.
Okay.
Okay, ma'am, you can step off. One thing I have to direct you is, I don't want you talking about the testimony up here on the stand. You can answer factual questions about like what day of the week it was or something like that, but how you testified and what you testified up to here, can't talk about. Fair enough?
Oh, okay, yes,
Okay, relax, we're good. Why don't you just, that young lady will escort you out that way, and we'll bring you back in here in 15 minutes,
okay,
okay?
thank you.
Ms. Mick, as soon as she's out, we'll clear the record here. Anything for the record?
Nothing from the state, Your Honor.
Ms. Menashe?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
Okay. We're on break until
after they took the ventilator out. It was only about 10, 15 minutes.
Thank you. No further questions.
Okay, maybe you may step down. You're done.
Okay. Thank you.
You okay walking through the obstacle course there? You okay?
Yeah,
Okay.
I can show you back out, ma'am.
just a little clumsy.
Call your next witness.
The state calls Mariah Havens.
Okay, ma'am, raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Go ahead and make yourself comfortable there.
Thank you.
Okay, you've got a mic there in front of you. I need you to say your name for the record and spell it for us so that my court reporter can get used to your diction.
My name is Mariah Havens, M-A-R-I-A-H, and my last name H-A-V-E-N-S.
Y'all hearing her okay? Okay. Speaker?
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Havens, can you please tell me how you know Troy Allison?
Troy Allison was my stepfather for 18 years.
How old were you when you met him?
I think I was 7.
Okay. And can you tell me a little bit about him? What kind of person was he? What was he like?
Yes, he was really sweet. I remember my mom first met him. They were dating for a little while before I got to meet him, like I'd say almost a year. And the first time I ever got to meet him, I met his dog Harley. And so I was over the moon because he had a puppy and I was a young kid. But Troy was just really sweet. He always took the time to listen to people. He was active. He played softball for an alumni team in Grove City. You asked me about Troy, right? Was that the question? Okay. He was a really good stepfather too. He had stepfathers in the past as well. So I guess he never felt like he was ever trying to be my parent or my father. He always gave me and my mom space if we had issues or fighting. He never tried to come in and be the rooster of the hen house. He was just really sweet, really nice. He was a really good friend. He would give me advice. We always went to the softball games on the weekends, and in the summertime they would have a tournament which would last a few weeks. We were just a family. He was really sweet.
And what was his relationship like with your mother?
They were best friends. They could be the type of people, or they were the type of people that could just sit comfortably in silence, or you'd hear them laughing and talking for hours and hours. I never heard them fight, disagree. They just really liked spending time with each other. It seemed like that was enough for them. They didn't need any more than that.
Now, I would like to talk to you about May 24th, 2018. Can you tell me about that day, what you remember?
May 24th.
I think, do I have the wrong, that's the wrong admission date, I'm sorry.
I was I'm sorry.
Well, was Mr. Allison hospitalized in 2018?
Yes,
And was that in June?
yes.
Can you tell me about that?
So it was around 10 or 11 p.m. in the evening. My mom texted me and said that Troy was going to the hospital. So I asked my mom, I just texted her back and I said, what's going on? And she said that Troy had been hyperventilating and she called the squad. And when the squad got there, they said that he was fine. I mean, his breathing had calmed down. He stopped hyperventilating. And they said he was stable, but that his blood sugar was high, so they thought they should take him over to just get some, further lab work and get checked out.
And I'm sorry, I know he had a hospitalization in June.
Are you talking about a month prior?
But he also had one in July, is that correct?
Yes, sorry.
Okay, so,
Do you want to do the month?
is that what you were speaking of?
I'm speaking of to the day I was there.
Okay, so let's talk about that. That
Okay.
was in July?
Correct.
Okay, so continue where you left off.
So,
Your Honor, could we frame the year, could we frame this a little better?
Okay. Can you tell us what month and year it was?
yeah, sorry, I think we just got confused when we said May. No May, okay. June, Troy was in the hospital, so about a month prior,
And what year?
2018.
Okay?
That was for something else, unrelated to this, in a sense. And then he was in the hospital in July of 2018, so roughly a month later.
Okay. So July of 2018, thank you. Where were you when this whole thing started?
I was at home, I lived in Gehanna.
Okay. Did you live with Mr. Allison and your mother?
No, at the time I lived on my own with my husband at the time.
Okay. And how did you become aware of the events that you just spoke about with the squad and everything?
My mom texted me and said that she had to call the squad for Troy. So then I investigated, I asked why. I didn't just say like, yeah. So I asked why, and she told me that he had been hyperventilating.
So
Okay.
without telling me what your mom said, did you make a decision after speaking to your mother of what to do?
Correct, sorry.
It's fine.
I texted her back, received a response. I said, keep me updated. So about 30 minutes go by, and she texts me again. And based on that text, I called her. And while I called her, I started changing to go to the hospital.
So about what time was it then?
It was almost midnight.
All right. So after you got changed, what did you do?
I got to the hospital very fast.
And where did you go once you arrived at the
I
hospital?
met my mom right outside, and we walked back to where she had been. She was sitting in a room. Troy was in the emergency department at this point.
Okay. And the waiting room that you're speaking of, was it a part of that area or a different area?
It was part of that area. It wasn't like the general waiting room. It was like a private waiting room that a chaplain had put her in.
Okay.
And when I'd gotten there, the chaplain quickly came into that room and began attempting to tell me the situation.
Okay. And then when did you first see Troy?
I didn't, yeah, so I didn't want to speak to the chaplain. I wanted to get to where Troy was. So I just took my mom and literally started walking into the emergency, like the actual bays. And I saw Troy then.
All right. And what did you observe when you got in there?
So I did see Troy in a situation that would appear as if it was a code. And so there was a nurse that had him bagged, and he had AED pads on him, and they were doing compressions.
Okay. And did you say anything to anyone when you walked into the room?
Yeah, so I immediately started asking questions to assess the situation. So at first I asked what they were doing and how long it had been going on. I was trying to reference how long the code had been occurring. We were given a few different timelines. So then my next question, I had asked, what his blood sugar was. And they had advised me it was over 500. And then they had drawn another lab. It was like the machine only says high, which indicates that it's over 500. And then they told me it was in the 800s. Then I asked what his pH level and his bicarb was, because I was trying to determine if, in my mind, he was acidotic. And I'd asked if they actually had to shock him if he was in asystole, and had they checked for a pulse recently. And I did receive responses to those questions.
Now, you're using all of these terms that we've been hearing a lot. How is it that you know all of these terms and these things?
So I've been in healthcare since 2015. I'm a medical assistant at Ohio Health, but at the time I was in nursing school.
All right. And so you asked all of these questions. Did you speak to any doctors?
Yes, it was Dr. Woodard at the time.
And this was in the ER?
Yeah, in the emergency department.
Okay, and what did you learn from the doctor and the nurses?
Well, from what their answers were, in my mind, I could tell that they were suspecting diabetic ketoacidosis, DKA, which would make sense to me. That's why I was asking those questions. He had stated that, and then I asked kind of what led to this situation. And he said that Troy had a seizure.
Okay.
Oh,
stand
I'm sorry. I was,
Hold on, just
Sorry.
relax, okay? New question.
So after speaking to the doctors, what had you learned?
it was my understanding that he had had a seizure. And then after the seizure, he had stopped breathing. And then that started the code.
So you were walking in the middle of the code?
Towards the end of it, really.
So what happened after that?
Troy was stabilized, and we went around the corner for a CT scan.
What is a CT scan?
Well, they wanted to do a CT scan of his brain to see if there was any bleeding caused from the seizure.
All right. And how soon after you got there did that happen?
Pretty quickly after I asked all those questions, and they checked for a pulse rate and said that he was in sinus rhythm, essentially, resuscitated him and he was stable. It was right after that.
And
So
sorry, when you got to the hospital, about what time was it?
it was around midnight, maybe 12:10.
Okay.
So maybe even 12:15. When we got in there, it was like around, when I was asking all those questions and all that, like there were still things happening. It was still active in that moment. It was like 12:30-ish. And then, like, that's when all of that was happening. I mean, it's not like a split conversation, right? So, the nurse had to stop bagging him and put him on, he was intubated, obviously, so they had to put him on the ventilator. You stopped physically bagging him, and then you would put him on the machine to be able to go to CT. So once all that was done, we ran around the corner to CT. At this point, it was like 1 a.m.
And where were you when they took him to the CT?
I stayed right outside of the doors because if Troy had stayed stable in CT, then we were going to go straight up to the ICU. So I was like just intently listening to the ventilator to see if it made any indications that he wasn't stable while getting the CT.
And after the CT, what happened?
They rolled Troy out of the CT room and he immediately started heading towards the elevators to go up to ICU.
And about what time was that?
The CT only takes a couple minutes, so we're probably at like 1:10 at this point.
And after he's been taken up to the ICU, where do you go?
I grabbed my mom a quick coffee, so it's like right there on that floor. And the lady was really nice. I don't think she knew what was going on, but she's like, you don't have to pay for it. So I didn't have to like check out or anything, just grabbed the coffee and ran upstairs. So I felt like at that point it was probably like 1:12, 1:15.
And once you got up to the ICU, what did you do?
My mom was sitting in the waiting area, so I approached her and I asked if anything had happened. And then we started walking to the ICU unit itself.
And what happened next?
We walked up to Troy's room and William Husel was in the room already with Troy.
Was there anyone else in the room?
No, not to my knowledge.
And what happened once you walked into the room?
Once we were in the room, William Husel asked, well, am I allowed to say what we were told?
What was your understanding of that?
You give an answer, I'll make a
Okay.
declaration. Okay?
We walked into the room, it's very vivid, so I remember standing at the edge of Troy's bed, and my mom was to my right, and then Troy's in the middle. William Husel was off to my left, and he said that he was 99.9% sure that Troy was in total organ failure. To which I responded, did you get the results of the CT? He looked at me, but didn't answer my question.
And what time was this that you asked this question?
I mean, at this point, we're like at 1:15 maybe.
So how much time had it elapsed since he'd got the CT scan?
Minutes. I mean, if that was like at 1:10, so we're talking about 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes.
All right, so you asked about the results. What happened then?
He did not respond to me, and then, quite frankly, didn't make any eye contact with me at all after that. He began to address my mother.
All right, and then what happened?
He asked my mom if she was aware of Troy ever wanting to be on life support.
Okay, and what happened after that?
We were advised that William Husel said that he could give Troy something to make him comfortable and remove the tube.
And at any point, did he ask you or your mother about signing or a DNR-CC or a DNR-CCA?
We did not discuss any code status.
Okay, so after he said he could give him something to make him feel comfortable and take the tube out, what happened next?
That's what they did. So a nurse came in and approached Troy with medication, and we stepped out just briefly.
And at what time was that?
This would have been like around 1:20, probably like 1:20.
So the nurse comes in around 1:20, and what happens after the nurse comes into the room?
The nurse approaches Troy and has a syringe and is going to give him medication through his IV.
Okay,
And then we were asked to step out. So they just pulled the curtain.
did you see the nurse administer the medication?
I didn't see him, I just saw him approach him with the syringe
Okay.
near where Troy's IV was. But I didn't watch him push it in.
Did they give you the option to stay in the room?
Not while they took the tube out.
All right, so after you've left the room, what happens?
They pulled the curtain for just a brief moment. And then they pulled it back and let us in. And Troy was dead already.
So you walked back into the room, what did you see?
Troy wasn't breathing. My mother and I both walked up to him, but she had put her hands on his chest and mentioned that he wasn't breathing.
And when you walked in, did you touch him at all?
I went up to him with my mother, yes. So she was like on his chest and I was kind of like holding his shoulder and his arm.
And how soon after you had left the room did you go back into the room?
The curtain was pulled, I mean, briefly. It's like 2 to 3 minutes maybe.
And did anyone tell you what medication they were going to be giving Troy?
No,
Did they tell you how much of any medications they'd be giving him?
no.
And at the time of this, did you know what was going on and what was happening?
So in my brain, I could make somewhat sense of what was being told to us, but I didn't understand how we got there. So with everything that had been done in the ED and Troy being somewhat stable, now again, stable enough to go to the ICU, yes. Does that mean he's sick? Yes, like I know that. But I didn't understand how we got from stable to the ICU for continued care to he's dead, we should just pull the plug. Hindsight 2020, I wish I would have said something, but I think maybe at that moment I wasn't feeling as medically knowledgeable and felt more like a stepdaughter trusting this provider, but I didn't understand exactly how we got there. So from my understanding,
Objection, Your Honor, non-responsive at this point.
so,
Okay, let's stop. She needs to ask you another question because you're going on a little bit. That's okay. Let her ask the question. That's how we work, question and answers. Okay?
thank you.
So, why were you confused about how you got there? Let's talk about the CT. Why were you asking about the CT?
Because the CT would be an indicator on if there's any brain injury. Did he have a brain bleed? Is there brain swelling? Like, that would be an indicator to me of Troy's prognosis.
So, why was that your question in response to being told that he was in organ failure?
Because how would Troy be in total organ failure if you don't even have the results of a CT? So that's why I wanted to know if he had.
Okay, let's stop for a second, okay? I'll sustain the objection. Let's go with it here. We work on questions and answers. When you ask a rhetorical question, that's an inappropriate answer.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
I understand why you were doing it, just that she has to lead you through this process, okay?
Also, Your Honor, for the record, I know she's not a medical personnel, so I'd object to any further questions about her medical knowledge.
Well, she is the human being she is, so we will deal with it as it goes. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. And at any point, did you ask any other questions of staff while you were there?
Not in the ICU.
And after you walked back into the room, did anything happen after you went into the room and you realized that Troy was dead? What happened after that?
So when the nurse and Dr. Husel were walking out, we were advised that they would return once Troy's heart stopped beating. So about 3 minutes go by and Dr. Husel came in and said that Troy's heart had stopped.
Okay.
Oh.
No, go ahead.
But he wasn't breathing. So in my opinion, he.
Objection, Your Honor, is to her opinion.
Okay. I'll permit it.
In my mind, I felt like I was looking at a non-breathing person, so that would mean to me that they were dead.
And after you were told that Troy was dead, what happened?
We went out back to the ICU, like a waiting area in the hallway. We, as my mother and a chaplain, approached us, the same chaplain from the ED. And she began asking my mom and I questions about like Troy's primary care, medications, and asked my mother to sign a DNR.
Okay. So this was post-extubation?
Correct, in post him telling us he was dead.
Real quick, this is State's
Okay,
Exhibit.
hold on. You want to do what?
Am I allowed to have my water?
Oh, yeah.
I'm so sorry.
She has a water out there?
Yeah. Oh, we can get you a bottle of water too.
That's great. I'm sorry, my mouth's just getting dry. I'm really sorry. Thank you, sorry.
Not a problem.
Thanks. And for the record, this is State's Exhibit 9A. And is this a picture of Troy?
Yes.
Do you know when this photo was taken? How close?
That's from his ID.
Okay. Do you know how old that photo was at the time?
Oh, gosh, no. So he was 44. I guess it would have been expiring. It's usually they're only good for 4 years.
And is this how you remembered him looking that day or around that time frame?
I think he was a little bit more shaven and a little, maybe a little slimmer, but.
Okay. Thank you. No further questions.
Ross?
Your Honor, may we just approach on the side real quick?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I don't need everyone.
Okay. I'm worried about getting into a situation, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna send you to lunch early. We're gonna come back at 12:30, do a little bit more, try to get this witness done, and then we'll be set up for 1 o'clock. Okay? I know I'm giving you an early lunch, but I'm trying to logistically to make this work for y'all, so we'll do our best with it, okay? Does that give you enough time for lunch? It's an hour and 5 minutes or so? Yeah. Okay, good enough then? Call them up.
All right.
Just relax for a second. Have a good lunch, guys. Okay, everybody be seated. Ma'am, we're gonna bring you back at 12:30, okay? We're gonna try to do as much as we can. We may have to carry you on after the video testimony, okay? Bear with us now. Here's the rules. You can't talk about your testimony on the stand, okay? If someone approaches you and asks about how you testified, it is taboo. You don't say anything, okay? If there's a factual question you answer, fine, okay? But if it involves how you're testifying or what you're testifying to, it's not allowed, okay?
Thank
Any questions?
No.
We'll see you back in an hour. Speaker, anything for the record?
Just real quick, Your Honor, just where we did plan on having our witness at 1:15-ish, so it does give us a little bit more time, hopefully, to
Okay.
wiggle room. We sent the link for 1 o'clock, probably just to make sure, but they'll be ready around 1:15.
Okay. Fair enough then. Ms. Menashe, anything for the record?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
Okay. We're out to lunch.
Well,